February 4th, 2001. A crowd of 35,321 fans enter Legion Field for the inaugural game of the Birmingham Thunderbolts, as they take on the Memphis Maniacs. The city was ready for professional football. The city, just like the rest of the country, was ready for the XFL. But after a 22-20 loss, things went south quickly for the Thunderbolts. The team finished with the worst record in the league at 2-8, and was only able to average 17,002 fans per game, which was the second worst total in the league. To make matters worse, they were playing in a stadium that held over 83,000 spectators, so every game felt empty. Attendance dropped by 50% to under 18,000 in their second home game, and in their final 3 home games, the Thunderbolts averaged under 11,000 fans per game. Things were bad in Birmingham, and things were bad for the XFL. They were so bad, in fact, that the league folded after 1 season. And that was the last that we ever heard from Birmingham in the XFL ever again. That is, until 2020. Because when it comes to the XFL in Birmingham, the city is trying to get back in.
New tonight, it's confirmed the city of Birmingham is going after an XFL team. We spoke with City Council President William Parker about that tonight. Now, this comes a year after the now defunct Birmingham Iron played its first game in the Alliance of American Football. Parker says he believes an XFL team would do well in Birmingham after fans turned out the way they did for the Birmingham Iron.
Birmingham city leaders hoping to see football year-round.
City Council President William Parker says his mission is to bring the XFL to the city and bring professional football.
It might be a bit too early to talk about potential expansion, since we don't really know the financials of the league, and you never want to see a league like this get too big too fast. But Birmingham is looking to lure an XFL team into the area. Thanks to an increased hotel tax that has already brought in over $500,000 to the city, and could bring in an average of $3 million per year, Birmingham now has funds to possibly bring sporting teams into the city, and the XFL is in that category. So with all of that being said, should Birmingham get a team? What are the pros and cons of bringing Birmingham into the XFL? Let's take a look. Before I begin, leave a comment down below with your thoughts on the XFL possibly going into Birmingham. Do you think that Birmingham should get a team? And let's assume for this thought project that the financials work out, and you don't have to worry about the league growing too much, losing money, or the quality of the play on the field dipping because you now have an extra team in the league. Would you want to see an XFL team playing down in Alabama? Let me know what your thoughts are there. Now, before looking at the pros and cons, let's take a brief look into Birmingham's history with teams in professional football leagues. Birmingham has tried to lure an NFL team for quite some time. I made a very in-depth video about this subject if you want to check it out in the upper right corner. However, here's a brief summation. As part of the NFL-AFL merger, Commissioner Pete Rozelle pretty much mandated that every NFL team play in a stadium that holds at least 50,000 spectators. The Boston Patriots didn't play in such a stadium and had trouble finding a venue, so they considered moving to Birmingham until Schaefer Stadium was built at the 11th hour. And the Minnesota Vikings were having similar troubles with their stadium, so they considered moving to Birmingham until the Metrodome ended up getting constructed. Then 20 years later, when the Metrodome was having trouble, the Vikings considered moving to Birmingham again. But when the city of Birmingham refused to build a new stadium to replace Legion Field, this never materialized. But that hasn't stopped the city from having teams in other football leagues. In 1974, the World Football League was created, and the Birmingham Americans were one of the teams in the league. From an attendance perspective, they were the most successful team. The team averaged a league-best 37,135 fans per game, although you never quite know how many of those fans were actually real, as the WFL had a tendency to heavily inflate attendance numbers. Take this example from the Philadelphia Bell, for instance.
There were 56,000 people in the first game in Philadelphia. What no one knew until later was only 5,000 actually paid to get in.
We got to the game and the stands are packed. And I remember telling my wife, Patty, oh, this is great. We made the right decision.
I had my picture on the cover of the program. And I looked at my wife at the time. I said, I'll never have to prove myself again.
Then afterwards, we found out that they gave away the tickets at supermarkets.
On the field, the team was a success, as they won the World Bowl. But off the field, not so much. In short, they owed a lot of money to a lot of people. They owed so much money that immediately after they won the World Bowl, their equipment was seized by the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. This led to a completely different Birmingham team joining the WFL in 1975 under the name of the Birmingham Vulcans. Once again, Birmingham led the league in attendance, averaging just under 24,000 fans per game. Considering the fact that games in 1975 were played on Sundays going up against the NFL, that's pretty good. Unfortunately for Birmingham, the league folded midway through the 1975 season, so just like that, the city was without a pro football team. They tried to get an NFL expansion team shortly thereafter, but to no avail. However, they would get a team that would play for all 3 seasons in the USFL by the name of the Birmingham Stallions. The team was relatively successful, making it to the postseason in 2 of the 3 seasons that the league was operating. And off the field, they had great attendance. In 1984 and 1985, they were 4th in the league in average attendance, bringing in an incredible 36,865 fans per game through the gates during that 1984 season. And their season opener against the New Jersey Generals that year was seen by 62,500 people. But after the 1985 season, the USFL went under after they tried to take on the NFL. It was a pretty solid 30 for 30 on that if you want to dive more deeply into it. Six years later, Birmingham would get another pro football team, getting the Birmingham Fire of the World League of American Football. This was much more of a mixed bag from an attendance standpoint. In the first season, Birmingham drew over 25,000 fans per game, which was the second most of any of the teams that played in the United States. The second season, though, not so much. Birmingham drew less than 15,000 fans per game that year, which was the worst total in the league, and one of their games against the Montreal Machine drew less than 10,000 fans. And in both seasons of the league, Birmingham made it to the postseason, so you can't say that the low numbers were due to a lack of success. After the league went on hiatus after the 1992 season, and all of the North American teams folded so that the league could become NFL Europe, Birmingham got another pro football team 3 years later in 1995 when the Birmingham Barracudas joined the Canadian Football League. By all accounts, this was a failure off the field, and this was the case for most of the teams in the United States that played in the CFL. Let's play a game called When Did College Football Season Start? Birmingham had 9 home games. Based on this attendance graph, see if you can guess when the college football season started. Turns out, when you can't play games on Saturdays because college football is king, and you're forced to play on Sundays against the NFL, things are going to go south pretty quickly. Then we got the XFL in 2001, which I already touched on. And finally, we got the Alliance of American Football from 2019 with the Birmingham Iron. That team finished in the top half of the league in attendance, which is impressive, considering that one of their games was played in front of just 6,500 fans when there was a tornado warning. You have to be certifiably insane to go to an AAF game at Legion Field in the middle of a tornado warning. There may have been some other minor football leagues that I missed along the way, but these were the big ones. Practically every competing league since the merger has gone to Birmingham. So would it make sense for this edition of the XFL to do the same? Let's weigh the pros and the cons. Starting with the pros, if you bring a team to Birmingham, they're the only thing in town. I made a video 2 weeks ago about the difference in bringing pro football to established markets that already have NFL teams versus markets that don't, if you want to check that out. However, there's no competition for the entertainment dollar from a pro sports perspective if you go to Birmingham. The XFL is it. And the XFL's biggest success from an attendance perspective right now is in St. Louis, which is the only market that doesn't have an NFL team already. It makes sense to try and replicate that success. Another pro to going to Birmingham is that they have experience in these leagues. Think of every major competing league since the AFL-NFL merger that operated during the springtime. Birmingham has been a part of all of them. It makes sense that you would bring a team to Birmingham in the XFL. And in some of these leagues, they've been successful from an attendance standpoint. They led the World Football League in both seasons, and they were near the top of the USFL in the final 2 seasons of that league. And it seems like the city wants it. On February 17th, the Birmingham City Council put out a Twitter poll asking people if they would want to see an XFL team. There were only 465 votes cast, but the results were overwhelming. Over 87% of voters said they wanted to see the XFL return to Birmingham. Another poll from an NBC station in Birmingham asked whether or not the XFL could succeed in the city, and in that poll, over 77% of voters said yes. Now, I'm not sure how much you want to take away from Twitter polls, but based off of everything that I'm seeing and hearing, the city and the citizens would rally behind their team if they got one. Now let's weigh the cons. So there are definitely pros with expanding to Birmingham, but there are definitely cons as well that come with expanding into the city. They drew incredible numbers in the World Football League and the United States Football League. But that's the past. That was a generation or two ago. Looking at their endeavors since the 1990s, looking at the Fire, Barracudas, Thunderbolts, and Iron, at best they were in the middle of the pack when it came to attendance. At worst, they were at the bottom. Their numbers aren't as strong as you might think they are, especially when the team is not winning on the field. And that's a problem when you factor in their stadium. The new XFL team would have to play at the old and carnivorous Legion Field, which seats over 71,000. Legion Field is mainly comprised of bleacher seats, and is designed in a way where there's no real distinguishable upper level. With certain stadiums like the Dome where the Battlehawks play, or the Alamo Dome where the San Antonio Commanders of the AAF played, you can mask the fact that the upper level is empty pretty easily. You can't do that at all with Legion Field. Does the league really want to go to a stadium that's old and will not look good on television at all? Now, I'm not sure if this would only be a temporary home for 2021, because when the 2022 season starts, UAB will be moving into a brand new 45,000 seat stadium, which will be much better. But everything that I've read only talks about Legion Field, and mentions nothing of the new UAB stadium. So if that's the case, that's not good. Then we have the TV market issue. The TV contracts are one of the big ways that the XFL survives long term, because right now they aren't getting a cent out of these TV deals. Right now, you've got 8 cities that host XFL teams. New York is the #1 market in the country. Los Angeles is number 2. Dallas is number 5. DC is number 7. Houston is number 8. Tampa is number 12. Seattle is number 13. And St. Louis is number 23. All 8 markets are inside the top 25. And 5 of the markets are inside the top 10. Birmingham, if they join, would be in the 44th largest TV market in the country. That could be a problem. So should the league expand to Birmingham? It's definitely an option, and I could see it going either way if the XFL does go past 8 teams. There's a bunch of markets that are going to be considered, including some of the top markets from the AAF like San Antonio and San Diego, and some of the bigger markets without NFL teams like Oakland and Sacramento once the new MLS stadium gets built. Birmingham is definitely going to be in the discussion. The attendance numbers are slightly overrated, the stadium isn't good, and the TV market is not ideal, but they are the only draw in town, and it seems like what you see is what you get. You know you're going to be drawing about 15,000 to 20,000 fans per game, and if the team does eventually move into the new UAB stadium, things could change dramatically for the better, and they could be playing in one of the best facilities in the league. It's an interesting hypothetical to think about. But what do you guys think? Let me know what your thoughts are on a possible expansion into Alabama for the XFL down in the comments below.